What is it that you want? A deceptively straightforward question, though one difficult to confidently respond to, and one with a subtle assumption often embedded within it. An assumption, at the same time, so obvious it seems bizarre to even mention it, that to desire means to lack something. In that sense, that feeling that something is missing, I wager most of us have an immediate intuition of it, that fear of missing out, that incompleteness, that emptiness that hankers after who knows what to fill it. And is not this feeling endemic to our contemporary situation, which chronically exposes us to others' enjoyments, to innumerable choices of brands and features, to the incessant advertisements teaching us what we lack and what to desire? And it's there we find a possible hint as to where this lack comes from, that it's not some universal dimension of desire itself, but instead a contingent function of present society, a society that demands an endlessly restless search for novelty and innovation, all for the sake of an economic system predicated upon and sustained by the movements and flows of desire. Is this the only or even most fundamental way to think of desire? Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari offer an alternative to this conception of desire as lack, exposing what they believe to be the paralogisms or faulty reasonings of a psychoanalysis that, in instantiating Oedipus and castration at the heart of psychic life, established the link between desire and lack, and in doing so inadvertently constrained the revolutionary expressions of desire that would disturb the status quo of a capitalist regime. In this 3-part miniseries, or 12 parts if watching this on TikTok or Instagram, we'll examine Deleuze and Guattari's book Anti-Oedipus, Capitalism and Schizophrenia. Unlike my other videos, I cover ideas and concepts here in a summary fashion rather than provide a methodical textual analysis, plodding along section by section. Of course, this means I will not provide the same level of depth, but in doing it this way, that is, with a bird's eye view of the entirety of the text, concepts will be organized and presented in a more systematic manner. And here will be the outline of topics to be addressed. Wrapping up this intro, I wish to mention a few parameters for this study. I will aim to address Anti-Oedipus on its own terms. This means I won't be explicitly incorporating how ideas get further elaborated in the follow-up to Anti-Oedipus, 1,000 Plateaus, nor how some ideas find their antecedent development in Deleuze's works such as Logic of Sense and Difference in Repetition. Perhaps at some point I'll move on to those texts depending on how these videos are received. Additionally, I will not be explicitly establishing the historical situation for this text, even though the events of May 1968, for example, were of notable influence. Undoubtedly, one can gain great insights from considering the historical context for great works, but at the same time, one always risks oversimplifying the innumerable and unpredictable flows that produce such great works. Great works that often cannot be accounted for and often exceed the contingencies that are made explicit through history and situation. Finally, I'd like to thank Cody Without Organs, whose engagement with videos over on TikTok were the most direct catalyst for embarking upon this project. Now let's get to the text. The concept of the machine is perhaps the first of many terms that form a central part of Deleuze and Guattari's distinct use of language. Machines are everywhere and are everything. Desiring machines, social machines, paranoid machines, technical machines, etc. By focusing on machines, individual persons or subjects are set at the periphery of these impersonal, desubjectivized processes. This move very much fits within a general trend of 20th century thought to decenter subjectivity and relegate it to the edges, a kind of afterthought, perhaps epiphenomenal emergence or a parasite of machines, as they call it. Consequently, we will not find much talk of consciousness, intentionality, will, or other concepts that rely on the notion of an inner world somehow removed or sanctioned off from the domain of the external and social. Each kind of machine exhibits its own kind of distinct functions and operations through what are called the passive syntheses, which engineer the parts of machines to function as units of production. If we think of what a machine is, it performs work that converts one thing into other things, whether by combining substances or breaking them apart. These syntheses are passive because no extrinsic governing agent oversees the process, nor do the syntheses self-reflect upon or direct what they are producing. 3 passive syntheses are discussed. First, there's the connective syntheses, second, the disjunctive syntheses, and third, the conjunctive syntheses. We'll be addressing each of these as we progress through the concepts in these videos. If you followed my Lacan series, you might be familiar with how he discussed the symbolic order as a machine governed by its own laws, running autonomously from any kind of conscious subject. An important difference, however, is that Deleuze and Guattari do not limit machines to the symbolic order, which perhaps would constitute only one kind of machine, the social machine, and not all the other machines at work. And rather than be understood in terms of their structure, these machines are thought in terms of their function. To consider the function of machines, particularly the manner by which they are productive, we'll need to first take up what these machines are composed of, that is, their flows and partial objects. To begin, there are non-coded flows of desire. We can think of non-coded flows of desire as a multiplicity of unstructured surges of energy in which certain strands of these flows spontaneously intersect. These flows are a kind of movement that includes people, traffic, words, genetic codes, money, and matter, just to name some. This glorious mess of flows collides with one another in unpredictable and chaotic ways, but in such a manner that a kind of order starts to arise spontaneously through the passive syntheses previously mentioned. These flows produce what are called partial objects, a term borrowed from psychoanalysis, notably Melanie Klein, but which here comes to refer to the material elements or working parts of desiring machines, consisting of a multiplicity of molecular functions that do not represent some kind of lost unity, a so-called whole object from whence the partial objects come. They're not representations of parental figures or basic patterns of family relations. Instead, they are degrees of intensity that both constitute the flows and breaks in those flows, entryways and exits through which desire is expressed. Examples of partial objects can include mouths and breasts, bees and flowers, etc. There's no necessarily predetermined configuration, only that these partial objects do eventually establish connections with one another in the flows and breaks of these flows. For example, breasts produce milk, mouths stop the flow of that milk, etc. These cases exemplify connective syntheses, mobilizing libidinal energies that will set what will be called desiring machines into motion. To address desiring machines independently from social machines is a bit misleading, since one can only address desiring machines as they function within social machines. Social machines, in turn, must be adequately understood through the desiring machines that make those social machines possible. As Deleuze and Guattari put it, there are no desiring machines that exist outside the social machines that they form on a large scale, and no social machines without the desiring machines that inhabit them on a small scale. Keeping that in mind, I'll be presenting things in a somewhat more discretely categorical and overly linear manner than Deleuze and Guattari present them, but only to gain clarity on each concept before we bring them together in the interweaving tangled web that these concepts are caught up in. Desiring machines combine partial objects, forming an interconnected set of on and off switches or flows and breaks. The ordering of these switches forms a kind of code that operates like a mathematical pattern unfolding from chance outcomes. This idea of codes is very much related to Lacan's notion of the game of odds and evens discussed in his essay on the Purloined Letter, but without any necessary or extrinsic transcendent law regulating the code. The code of desiring machines emerges immanently from within themselves. An essential dimension of desiring machines is that they are productive. That is, desire is not oriented toward the lack of objects, but toward producing objects. It does this by investing in the social field, even while the social field finds desiring production threatening and in need of repression often. Desiring machines and its desiring production appear to offer a materialist metaphysics that places a horizontal multiplicity and difference at the heart of being, and from which emerges the worlds that you and I take to be our everyday experience. In depersonalizing or desubjectifying desire, this metaphysical approach falls well within what can be considered a post-humanistic philosophy. Its materialist, non-linguistic, non-hierarchical presentation also seems to place it within what is commonly called post-structuralism. Giving rise to desiring machines, but also in conflict with them, is the body without organs, which we will turn to next. Desiring machines consist of partial objects, but partial objects emerge from something even more fundamental, the body without organs. If any term should be considered most primordial in the complex spiraling thought of Deleuze and Guattari, it is this. To be without organs here means to be without organization, to be a pre-structured body. The body without organs is a kind of undifferentiated amorphous materiality from which arises partial objects that eventually do get organized in desiring machines with their coded systems of flows and breaks. Deleuze and Guattari analogize the body without organs to an egg. If you think of an egg, it contains no prominent parts or structures when it's in the earliest stages. Yet it provides the raw material that will eventually become differentiated into the various organs that we think of a living organism having. However, the body without organs is not some stage of development that permanently fades away after organs appear, nor does it constitute some kind of primordially lost object or oceanic oneness that we ceaselessly seek to return to. Instead, it's always there alongside structured bodies, threatening those structures with a revolutionary destructuring or deterritorializing, a kind of wilderness of decoded flows that are running free. For this reason, the body without organs is also called a model of death. If the egg is the unorganized antecedent of structure, death could be thought of as the posterior dissolving of that structure through decay, a kind of threatening disorganization that's coextensive with organization. Now, although desiring machines are imminently produced through the body without organs, there emerge points of conflict between the two, between the organization of desiring machines and the disorganization of the body without organs, giving rise to what are called attraction machines, repulsion machines, and the synthesis of the two machines as celibate machines. The body without organs repels desiring machines in their attempt to break into and structure this body, leading to a kind of primal repression exerted by the body without organs, repulsing desiring production. This repelling of desiring production by the body without organs gives rise to what Deleuze and Guattari call the paranoid repulsive machine, whereby desiring machines have encountered a kind of persecutory apparatus. This expresses the disjunctive synthesis of the either-or or forced choice that we hear Lacan sometimes speak of. The disjunctive synthesis of paranoid machines seems to have something to do with the despot and the despotic machine, and we'll talk about that soon. At other times, the body without organs appropriates desiring production, giving rise to attraction or what are called miraculating machines. From what I understand, these machines produce a surplus of products with no cause or origin, hence the miraculating part. An example that they provide is capital, which is fluid and non-productive, but is also the condition for production. It would seem then that the miraculating machine is what kind of turns water into wine, so to speak, giving rise to flows previously not available. This appears to be an expression, I think, of connective syntheses as the both and that brings together partial objects and flows to give rise to new productive machines. Finally, there may be a reconciliation between these repulsive and attraction machines, giving rise to celibate machines and offering a new synthesis between desiring machines and bodies without organs. The celibate machine appears to be thought of in terms of the schizophrenic breaks that have a revolutionary character in their unbearable intensities. I believe the title celibate here is conferred upon it for having abstained from a particular social order, a breaking free from its codes and territorializations. Next time we'll discuss how desiring machines come to form social machines and the different kinds of social machines that Deleuze and Guattari analyze. If you found this style of video helpful and want to see more like it, and it's within your means, please consider making a super thank you tip. You can find the super thank you button below this video. If you wish to be an ongoing supporter of this channel, you can do so on Patreon, where I offer video transcripts and unedited materials. The link is below. I want to thank the following for already supporting this channel on Patreon. You can also support this channel by liking and sharing this video and subscribing to my channel. As always, thank you for watching, and until next time, be well.